Good afternoon, New York, and the rest of our listeners around the globe. My name is June Stoyer, and I'm the host of the Organic View Radio Show. Our podcast is available on iTunes, Zune, and you can also visit our website at www.theorganicview.com. If you have any questions for our guests, there are many ways you can contact the show. You can post a question on our wall on Facebook, Skype us, send us a tweet on Twitter to @TheOrganicView, or you can contact me directly at June Stoyer. If you'd like to be on the show or would like to find out about sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at questions@theorganicview.com. In this special series called the Neonicotinoid View, I will be joined by Walter Hoffaker, who is the president of the Professional Beekeepers Association. Walter is going to talk about the current situation in Austria before and after the vote to ban neonicotinoids in the EU, as well as the European Food Safety Authority's recent risk assessment about fipronil. So I would like to welcome to the show Mr. Walter Hoffaker. Good afternoon, Walter, and welcome to the show. Walter, can you please share with our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm glad to be on the show again. I'm a beekeeper in beautiful Upper Bavaria, organic certified. I've been volunteering my time for the last almost 10 years on the board of the German Professional Beekeepers Association. I'm serving as the president of the European Professional Beekeepers Association, and I'm the coordinator for the Apimondia working group on GMOs and the impact on beekeeping.
Thank you. Now, there's been a lot of news about Austria and neonicotinoids. Can you share with our audience what exactly is going on and why is Austria the target?
Well, as you've covered in your show extensively, neonicotinoids have been an issue that beekeepers have raised for at least the last 10 years as being extremely problematic to the health of honeybees and responsible for unacceptably high mortality rates about honeybees. After some pretty significant bee kill-offs in Germany and France and Italy, some of the member states in the EU instituted local bans of some of the applications of neonicotinoids. That automatically triggered a review process. So the European Commission asked the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, to report back to them on whether there is a scientific basis for these bans. And so the EFSA came back first with 3 substances of the neonicotinoid group and said, yes, there is a sound scientific basis for this. In fact, there is an unacceptably high risk to bees and also unacceptable gaps of information about the safety of these products. And now that the Commission had that information, they needed to make a proposal how to deal with this unacceptably high risk. In Europe, one of the core principles is the precautionary principle, so they invoked that. After that, we had a huge lobbying fight because the Commission made a proposal for pretty significant partial bans of 3 neonicotinoids EU-wide, and in the first round of voting, they didn't get enough vote to get it passed right away. They submitted it again, and this is pretty standard procedure, and there are slightly different voting rules when they go to this appeals process. And in this appeals process, there was enough support from the EU member states for the proposal of the Commission that they actually were able to implement it. So recently, they've announced in detail what they're going to implement. So that's very good news. And there's another substance that is not out of the neonicotinoid group chemically, but is causing similar problems. It's called fipronil, and EFSA has just released their report on that. So we'll probably go through the same process again for this fourth substance, and there are more coming. Austria in this process is quite interesting because on the one hand, it's one of the smaller countries in the EU, but maybe because of that, after some of the other countries like France, Italy, and Germany implemented bans, the chemical industry said to the Austrian government, we are going to make sure that everything is done right in Austria to use these products safely. And the Austrian government bought into this process. So they basically did not institute a ban back then. Instead, they instituted a monitoring program where as soon as a beekeeper suspected that there was something going on in relation to neonicotinoids, a team of scientists would basically document that case and find out whether in fact it was due to pesticide use. And so instead of proving the point of industry that in fact if you do everything right, if the farmers are properly trained, if the seed treatment is properly applied, if the equipment for seeding is right, you can avoid bee losses. They basically proved that even in a small country with a lot of effort to do it right, it is impossible to use these products safely. The Minister of the Environment and Agriculture in Austria, it's the same ministry in charge of both, was always very close to industry. So when it came to voting on the Commission's proposal, prior to the actual voting, he announced that Austria would vote against the proposed ban.
Wow.
And interesting was that he made this announcement when, for example, Germany had already announced that they would support the ban. And Germany made this announcement because they had realized that in their backroom activities, they were unable to organize a qualified majority against the Commission. So the German government, we know from a lot of sources, tried very hard because there are German companies like Bayer and BASF in this business big time. They tried to organize a majority against the ban, but when it was clear that they wouldn't have the votes, they decided they didn't want to take a public flogging over voting for chemicals against the bees. And so they announced they would support the ban and pretended that they were always for it, which was, not very ethical, but smart politically. Now, this Austrian minister announced at a point where it was clear that the votes wouldn't be there to stop the ban, that Austria would vote against the proposal of the Commission, supposedly to help the corn growers in Austria. Then what he probably didn't anticipate was that there was a huge public outcry because Austria prides itself in being pro family farming, pro organic farming, anti GMO. Everything that the world knows and Austrian consumers know about the farming policies is avoid huge monocultures, support family farming also in higher alpine elevations and things like that, promote organic. And it didn't make sense to the public at all why especially Austria would vote against this ban. And so this outcry was so bad. It was the other political miscalculation was he made the announcement the day before the official start of the election campaign season, because there are elections in Austria this fall. So it became the number one, probably, yeah, number one or number two election issue right away, that this guy had decided to vote against the bees and for the chemicals. There was a vote of no confidence in the Austrian parliament that he only survived because the governing coalition said, hey, we're going to have elections anyway in a few months. There's no point in changing horses right now. But essentially, this guy came under huge pressure and became a problem for his political party. So his party leadership forced him to make another announcement, and so he went in front of the press and said, "Oh, he supports the ban now." Now, I was then interviewed by the Austrian news agency, and I said, this is kind of amusing because this minister managed to cast an irrelevant no vote. Because at the time that he decided to vote no, it was clear that the vote there wouldn't be enough votes from other member states to actually have a ban. And then he announced that he was now for the Commission's proposal about a week after the vote had already taken place. So both his no vote and his yes vote were irrelevant, which is
the irony of the whole
very
thing.
Ironic. And given that how much beating he took for taking two irrelevant positions, he's probably not the sharpest knife in the drawer there in the cabinet. What is significant about this also is that here you have a minister of agriculture who essentially lost his job over voting against a measure to protect the bees. He is formally still the Minister of Agriculture in Austria right now, but everybody in Austria knows even if his party wins, he's not going to be the Minister of Agriculture in the next Austrian government. So they call him a walking dead.
Well, it's interesting that he would even try to push that agenda, especially since Austria is known for protecting its pristine farmland. And as you pointed out, you have several generations of family farmers that are there. One of their biggest exports is their agricultural products, which are unique to that particular region of Europe. I remember there was a huge battle over the right to state that the pumpkin seeds that were grown in Austria's Steiermark were from the Steiermark, because you had other countries that were basically trying to cash in on the demand for this highly sought after commodity, if you will. It was a very big battle. The Austrian government put its foot down and said, okay, well, unless it's grown in the Steiermark and has the seal of the Steiermark, you cannot say that it's from that region.
Yeah, Austrian government, when it comes to GMO, even though formally it is illegal in the EU to have a government ban on GMOs, the Austrian government decided to do it anyway, but that was an earlier government. But this position is so popular in Austria that you see signs on food and supermarkets and trucks from supermarket companies that they're proud to be GMO free everywhere. So anyway, the EU Commission then tried to sanction the Austrian government for their illegal ban of GMOs, and they could not get a majority of the other member states to support sanctions against Austria. It's Austria. That was a pretty risky route for Austria to take, but they had the courage. Austria has some very interesting approaches. For example, Austria has actually the safest nuclear power plant in the world. It's the nuclear power plant in Zwentendorf. And because the Austrian public was very much against nuclear power, this plant was built but never put into operation and is a museum now. And that's why it's the safest nuclear power plant in the world. It's that's, you know, given the history and some smart decision making of Austria, nobody in Austria could understand why this minister was casting a no vote at a point where it didn't make sense and where it didn't really reflect Austrian values.
There's a lot of information that's being circulated, but the bottom line, Walter, is that when it comes to protecting the environment, especially when you have family farmers whose livelihood is at risk, the people have enforced their needs and what they want for their country. And I think it's a great example for other countries to follow.
Yeah, I think, and also this minister is an example because you could see that his colleagues from the other member states, including our Minister of Agriculture in Germany, basically watched this guy walk into a blender, you know? And so he is kind of an example.
Well, clearly his staffers did not do their job and give him the heads up that, yeah, this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And he basically committed political suicide.
Actually, yeah, he essentially committed political suicide at a point where doing this was completely pointless. One thing that I should probably mention is that we had a EFSA workshop about bees and pesticides. And we think that there's a lot of that the ground is shifting right now in the favor of protecting the bees better. And there were people from USDA and from EPA at the EFSA conference in Parma. A few weeks ago, there was a EFSA colloquium on bees and pesticides. It was actually an international event where also people from US EPA and USDA participated. And it was quite clear that when neonicotinoids were originally approved in Europe and around the world, the tests to determine the risk for bees were obviously completely inadequate. So EFSA did not only reevaluate these products to then cause the Commission to institute this ban, but they also organized this workshop to bring in the science. What do we know about these risks and how can we better assess these risks going forward? And from my perception, we are going to have changes to the rules for pesticide approval. They're going to be a lot more strict. They're going to look a lot closer at honeybees, but not only honeybees, but also bumblebees and other important pollinators. And I think this signal that is coming from Europe will be heard in other countries and maybe change the regulatory system in other countries as well.
Thank you, Walter. Right. Thank you so much for coming back on the show today. It's always a pleasure to have you and to learn firsthand what is going on in other parts of the world, especially since you are so influential and you're really such a great person to talk to. You've made so much effort to help not only educate others, but take action and try to get the laws changed so that everybody around the world will benefit from your efforts, because what happens in one country will affect all of us.
Thank you very much for having me on the show again. And there's a good opportunity for your listeners to learn more about beekeeping around the world, because a movie that was very instrumental here in shaping public opinion is currently being launched in the US. The movie is being called More Than Honey. and I strongly recommend everybody should go and see it. We did a screening of More Than Honey at the event, at the EFSA event in Parma, and I know there's also been a screening at EPA offices in San Francisco a few days ago. So this film really raises the awareness in the general public of what's at stake.
I actually do have an interview that is going to be aired soon with the producer of the film, and we will definitely encourage people to see the film. Thank you so much, Walter. It's been a pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Everyone, we are out of time, but thank you so much for tuning in. And if you've missed a show, you can always subscribe to The Organic View on iTunes or visit our podcast archives at www.theorganicview.com. Have a great day, everyone.